give us all the dirty details and nobody's supposed to know. I promise it won't end up on the internet. All right, Randal Kleiser in the house.
Yeah.
Director.
Blue Lagoon, Summer Lovers, Grandview, USA, Flight of the Navigator, Big Top Pee-wee, White Fang, Honey, I Blew the Kids, One Plastic Bubble. Yeah, The Gathering, which was a Christmas special. Dawn Portrait of a Teenage Runaway. It goes on and on.
Well, how'd you meet? Randall was directing a movie called Flight of the Navigator, and this was early in the years of the new Disney. We have to fill you in on all this history because it's all way earlier than your brain would know. But I mean, Disney was a big animated company forever, and then it started going down, and it wasn't doing very well. And then they brought in...
Fact check me. I want to know how much I do or don't know.
All right.
One of the nephews ran it for a little while, right? Or one of the...
No, they had somebody run. They did have somebody running it for a while.
But then Eisner came from Paramount, right?
But when they brought Eisner in, everything changed. The company...
Eisner brought me in.
Yeah, and Eisner brought Randall in. He also brought me in.
Okay.
Separately.
So Grease was at Paramount at the time, and then you guys went, okay, great.
Michael Eisner worked in those days with Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was his second in command. Jeffrey was the guy on... basically talking to all the filmmakers, and Michael was dealing with all the money and the big stockholders. That was the beginning of the major growth. Disney went from being the last of there were maybe 7 major studios. It was the last, looked like it was going to go away. It's now become the biggest.
Touchstone Pictures,
yeah, they
Hollywood Pictures, and Disney Pictures. Yeah, 3 studios.
They started with Disney, and they broke it up so that, because Disney was the mandate for Disney was to do family movies, G-rated movies.
Right.
They wanted to make, filmmakers that they liked wanted to make other kinds of movies. So Eisner came in and said, okay, we have to have another branch, and they called it Touchstone. Most cases.
Hollywood Pictures was.
He had 2 bosses at Touchstone, and what he wound up doing was they both didn't get along that well. So he said, okay, you can have your own company. You'll run Hollywood Pictures and you'll run Touchstone. And he had 2 companies going simultaneously. The fact is, in some cases, the movies that they made could have been made by either one. Flight of the Navigator was a movie that was brought to them, and they only got to have the domestic rights to that movie.
So Eisner brought you to Disney for Flight of the Navigator, for something else first?
I think it was Flight of the Navigator. I think that's the first one.
The movie was a combination between
Mark
Damon's company. Mark Damon was
Producer Sales Organization.
Yeah, that's it. Producer Sales Organization had the project. They ran this company. They brought the project to Disney. Disney says, we want to make it. Disney was the big dog in the room. So once they said they wanted to make it, these guys... We didn't even have another conversation with him until we were in post-production.
I was in creative meetings where I was being pulled in 2 different directions.
Yes. Until it stopped at some point.
PSO wanted an action movie and Disney wanted a family movie. So they kept wanting to rewrite things like having the government come in and shoot the flying saucer down. They just said, no.
Where did you stand on this whole thing?
Actually, I just rode the middle of it, and it came out quite well. Yeah, being pulled in both directions, because it came out like better than it would have been either way.
Yeah,
I came in late in the process, but there was still some.
So was there another producer that somehow quit?
Yes, there were other producers. There were 2 producers. They probably got the deal with Mark Damon's company, but Disney wasn't interested in dealing with them because they weren't real filmmakers.
Was you also brought in by Eisner because the whole Elephant Man deal?
Well, ultimately, probably yes. I mean, that's how I got to meet Jeffrey Katzenberg and the people at Paramount. They knew who I was. Yeah. They had given me a deal, and Eisner and Jeff Katzenberg, and it was a producing deal, overall producing deal. If I developed stuff that they wanted to make, they would have had me make them, but they wanted to get it going quickly. And
so they said, hey, we got this thing here.
Jeffrey called me up one day, called me into his office and said, look, would you read this script? And it was Flight of the Navigator. And he said, we're going to make this movie. So I read the script. I said, hey, it's terrific. I like it. He says, you want to produce it? I said,
it's just like all my other movies. Why not?
He said, you need to meet Randal Kleiser. Randall's going to direct it, and, we'd like you to be involved.
So on that note, the movies we just discussed that you had made, it's just like with him, it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
This one. So how did that?
A sci-fi movie or a visual effects movie, and I was always wanting to do them. I was a big fan of horror and science fiction and special effects. My brother is a visual effects supervisor. He worked on Tron, and so this was a chance to work with him. We came up with some cutting-edge visual effects that had never been used before. The reflected spaceship was done with reflectance mapping, where you take the background and you wrap it onto a CGI wireframe, and it looks like it's mirrored. It was used later by Cameron and Terminator 2. We did it first.
Yeah, it was the first time anyone had ever done it.
And also the first time morphing was done. We had the ship change shape too, something that my brother had done on a Tide commercial. He had a bottle of Tide turned into the United States. I said, wow, can we do that with a spaceship? And he said,
Did he work on Terminator 2 as well?
nope.
No.
Cameron just took our idea and flew with it.
I think they claim being the first ones to do morphing.
We were way ahead. We were ahead of them. And Peter Donnan was
Yes.
also on the picture, and he was a visual effects guy, the son of Stanley Donnan. I mean, we did a bunch of things on that movie that were the simplest kind of visual
I was going to say that
and the most complex.
like the special and the visual effects, they really blend nicely in that movie. Some of those, like the map paintings or whatever, and the forced perspective and all that, you can't even really tell. A lot of older movies, you can tell.
But a lot of the stuff, I mean, I was learning because I knew nothing about it. Randall knows everything about that stuff. I mean, because he's a student of it. He's always been.
And from my brother, right?
Yeah, and from your brother. The most advanced effects were all done by Jeff Kleiser. And Jeff had a company, and now you have to remember in doing the mapping, I'm priming your mind a little bit so you remember. When we were doing that, the amount of computing time to do that, we had to use Cray computers in San Diego and take all day long to render a couple of seconds. I mean, the rendering took forever. Now it's everything it happens so fast.
Laptop or iPhone.
Yeah, you can do on an iPhone what we were doing in those days, but this was the beginning of it. No one had ever done that, right? I mean, I'd never seen it before.
And the way that they got the model into the computer was by touching all these little grids together. It was very time consuming. Today you can just scan it, poof, it's done. But there you had to touch each intersection point.
So the physical model, and it has to kind of map it out in 3D space.
Even the production side was kind of interesting because we wound up, the spaceship itself, we had a full-sized model. It wasn't a model, it was a full-size spaceship. We built it here in LA. We built the thing, but we have a certain kind of a crane that could move it and hold it and, have an armature that would hold it, all of those kind of things. And of course, we had to be able to take out the crane when you saw it. And a lot of that was very simple front surface mirror effects. Remember, you'd take a mirror, you'd put a mirror in front of the lens.
Between the camera and the boom.
Yeah, no, but the mirror could be, when I say front surface, you could shave off the silica to shape the edge of the spaceship. The rest of it was a mirror.
So it's showing the
sky behind you. And that winds up being the sky, so it takes away all of the...
We also had actually 2 full-scale ones.
That's right.
Yeah, and then we schlepped it to Norway.
That was the weirdest part, but it was...
We'll get to that. Well, that's another part of the story we'll get to. We had thought we were only going to do the whole movie in Florida, really. We
could have.
I don't know if you remember, but when we were originally planning the movie, we were looking at different places to do it.
You went to Houston?
Houston. As the movie got postponed till it started, the weather picture for the area for that time of year wasn't right. We needed blue skies and white puffy clouds. And by the time we got to shoot it, the only place left in the country was Florida. We actually moved ourselves and wound up doing Florida.
The reason we were going to Houston was because of NASA.
That's right. NASA was there.
But then we realized that NASA was also in Florida.
Yeah.
But
yeah, we got to talk about that too.
The bizarre part was that we went to Norway for the interiors. Because
for the interiors, which that makes even less sense.
Well,
now,
but you kind of
explain it to you.
He can explain it. I never got it, but go ahead.
But no, here's what happened. We were going to shoot the whole movie in Florida. The full-sized version of the ship, we had the whole interior built in L.A.
where the seat comes up.
We were going to send it to Florida, put it on a train, and have it moved down to Florida. We were going to get a studio down there. We were shooting, I think, from around Thanksgiving. Any other part of the world was pretty cold. We get there, and I get a phone call from Mark Damon, who was partially financing the movie, And as I said, he owns foreign, and he says, can you shoot some of the movie in Norway? Norway. The movie takes place in Florida. How could we possibly shoot in Norway? Well, what could we ever do in Norway? I said, well, we got to find something to shoot in Norway. I said, why? He says, well, because we can get money from Norway. That's like free money.
Now we'll spend all that money getting the damn ship over there, but
that to me was exactly what I said. I said, do you realize what it takes to get this ship to Norway? We're going to have to, the crew, we're going to have to take a lot of our crew. And if we have to hire new crew, they don't even know the movie. I mean, we're going to have to get a Norwegian crew. So odder things don't happen except in the movie business.
Didn't he also say that there were blocked funds? That
Yeah, I think that's what he
studios
says.
in Norway?
Yes, that's right.
From other movies.
You're exactly right. He said that there were blocked funds. They were only available in Norway, so we had to shoot in Norway. Well, the only thing we had left was the interior of the spaceship. We had to take that set and ship it to Oslo.
Along with the back projection people.
That's right.
And
oh sure, 'cause that was that projection.
That's right.
That's all got enhanced. It didn't register because nowadays you just throw a green screen up and
they had to bring 2 projectors because one was for what you saw and one was for, I think, some reflections and stuff, so that they had to sync up 2. I mean, there was a whole Megillah, a big deal.
a rumor that I heard, was that the block funds didn't come through.
I heard the same thing later. After we did this whole thing, we heard that the block funds never came through, but we were already done. And
politics.
we went in February. Now, it's daylight from about 11 to 2. We get up in the morning, it was dark. We'd be inside a warehouse, a heated warehouse with this big ship.
Hour outside of Oslo.
That's right.
Good
We had to
Lord.
drive out there. Yes, sir, you remember. Okay. It was an hour outside of Oslo. And you really didn't get to hang out much in Oslo because it was freezing cold and snow and everything. I mean, there was no place. We'd walk outside. I had a beard then, and my beard would freeze immediately. I mean, it was so cold. But we would be inside most of the time. And then when we left, it was dark again. So we never saw daylight.
Well, except
on Sundays.
Sundays. So Barry would go skiing.
Yeah.
With not the
Cross country or
cross country. This country skiing
Yeah.
adventure.
How long were you there for?
Several weeks. We were there for probably 4 weeks. And we meant to be there like a few days. The child labor laws in Florida are basically restrictive, like they are here too, particularly in movies. You can't have a kid on the set for like more than 6 hours. And our kid was 12 years old. I mean,
He was like a set teacher.
he was there. He was in just about every shot. So we really had to work around the schedule and not have too much with him on any given day when we were in Florida. Well, when we're in Oslo, he's in every shot. We were told, again, wrongly, that, you don't have to worry because you don't have to deal with those U.S. child labor laws. What we found out was the child labor laws in Oslo are even worse. They don't even want children working on weekends. So we had to work 6 days because the idea was to save us some time. So we wound up getting a double. You remember?
Wig.
With a wig
Shot him
from the back. And that was the kid.
So now I'm going to keep an eye out.
This was the hard part because I was directing the kid to react to what he was seeing on the screen, and he didn't speak English.
In retrospect, it was funny, but it was not funny while we were doing it. In addition, if you saw the movie, there's a whole lot of puppetry inside the spaceship.
Is that the Henson guy?
No. He's his own.
Yeah,
Something
it's
is
a short circuit.
Okay. Great movie.
He did Short Circuit too. Yeah.
To get Max, the creature, to move around, we had him on was like a 4-story set, and he was up above on wires and wheels and with his puppet hanging down. There were times where he almost went off like the set because they were on dolly tracks above, and then
They underestimate what puppeteering really.
And then we had the Puck Marin, which was the little animal that Joey sees, that his whole character sees, and the ultimate takes home, and all of the other weird little animals that are in the little cages alongside, they all had to be operated too. So we had a couple of puppeteers along with Tony.
Tim Blaney now.
Yeah. So it was not an uncomplicated process. Every aspect of it was probably harder than it ever needed to be if we could have done it all in Florida, but nevertheless, we got it all.
It's an adventure.
And I say that that's a great testament to Randall because, I mean, a lot of people would have lost their cool or gotten crazy. And he's, it was like, we would sit down and say, hey, it is what it is. Well, whatever it takes, that's what it's going to take. We got to do it. Another aspect of it is that the ultimate voice of the ship, the creature, whatever it is that he's, I mean, it's a ship that's also a creature, but we hadn't figured out yet. I mean, that didn't have that until later.
Yeah, we just had a script.
Yeah, we just had.
So how'd you get this guy who plays Pee-wee?
No, it was Pee-wee Herman.
Pee-wee Herman. No, that's his name, right? I don't know. Is the actor's name or is the character's name?
Sadly, Reubens.
Paul Reubens.
But he used Paul Mall. He didn't want anyone to know it was him, so he didn't have
The title, and was that?
And the name Charles after a cigarette.
Yeah, that's.
And that all came from when the whole film was together, and we were, kind of testing it and figuring out what the best voice was. And I think that's another situation. No, but you came up with that, and we tried. So every grade we tried
those things that people have who have throat cancer, trying to come up with an interesting voice. And then finally, I was visiting Paul on the set of Pee-wee's Playhouse, and I thought,
How'd you get him to agree?
well, I showed him the script and talked him into it.
I mean, I know he had a successful run with Playhouse, but why would he not want his name on a big Disney film like
That's
that?
a good question. I don't know.
Hmm.
No, because he later did that same voice for Star Tours at Disneyland. I don't know why he was in that game.
I mean, I could
surprise the audience.
I could speculate because, I mean, that voice was connected to the character that he created for his own Pee-wee's Playhouse. And it was so known as that, he might have felt that he was affecting his brand.
You said something earlier which kind of leads to a bit of a segue, but I think a lot of people have blurred lines about what the difference between a director and a producer is. For us, it's pretty obvious, but maybe you can explain a little bit about, for people who aren't that deep in the industry, what exactly your job is when you get hired on the project.
Trying to get the script to come across with the actors and the cameraman. Like the director works with the cameraman on the composition and the camera movements and works with the actors on the performances. And then the producer makes it all happen.
I think early on that the director of photography was really only focused on imagery and the director was really only focused on acting. The lines have kind of been blurred a little bit now. You have a lot of say over cinematography and so forth. Do you fancy yourself the type of director who really wants to stay dialed into the actors and just hire a DP that has a vision? Or
I studied film at USC with Jerry Lewis, and he taped all of our sessions and turned it into a book called The Total Filmmaker. And he told us that there's either performance directors or technical directors, but then there's the total filmmaker, and he wanted us to try to do that. And that's what I've always tried to do, combine technical and performance.
I think that's great, and we talk about that a lot for producing, how helpful it is if you've AD'd and you've held a boom and you've shot something, how much better of a producer you can be because you understand.
Now, did you go to art school? Because you're also an artist. I mean,
yeah, when I was in high school, I went to art school, yes.
The value of that for a producer, having a director like Randall, is that Randall drew out the shots. He did his own storyboards, so we were able to get a real sense of what he wanted to do before we ever had to.
That brings up another question, because there's directors like Spielberg who are absolutely 100% movies mapped out. Just get these shots. We don't need anything else. And then there's ones like Cameron who are shooting coverage from all different directions. So where do you?
I like to be like Hitchcock and have everything worked out ahead of time.
Yeah. So the film before. You can really see every.
You're still able in doing that to take advantage of happy accidents that happen. There's things that come out.
People come up with great ideas. We switch, but you have to have a plan going in.
Do you always shoot the script first and then play?
Or on the set, when you're talking to the DP or the actors may come up with an idea, and then we shift it when we're about to shoot.
Well, he always had a system. He always had a plan. If the plan could change and he saw a reason why to make it, maybe that'll work better or different, he would give it a shot. And it was freeing, I think, for the actors. I hate to say it, but I was also an actor in them, a very small part.
Wait, I think I saw you somewhere. Let me think. I remember this. You're in the audience? No, you're in another movie in the audience. In the producers.
And I was in the casting sessions with Randall in Florida. We had a local casting director. And he said, we need a doctor. So they brought in a bunch of people, and Randall was reading them. He would say, well, why don't you read the off camera or something like that? So
You're always better than
I was reading the off camera, and these people would come in. And he came over to me afterwards and he said, all of these guys, they all look like pharmacists. They looks like we're in a drugstore. They don't look like doctors. You look like a doctor looks like you. Why don't you do it? Okay. Nervous? A little bit, yeah. I was nervous, not so much because of the acting, because I'd done plenty of acting in my life, but not acting in a movie.
Did you know that he started at theater?
I started in theater before, so I was fine with the acting part of it, but the way it was done and the way you did it, even though I certainly knew a lot about it from having been a producer and been around, it's still, it was a little nerve-wracking, but no, it was a lot of fun. And it was a key scene, too, because it's in the hospital. David sees his younger brother, who is now older. So I got to be in a few scenes there.
Wait, which one are you? The one that comes in and tells the parents something?
Yeah.
That's you?
That's me. A lot of hair.
Yeah.
That would,
dark beard.
dark beard.
Yeah, I did. I definitely me there. That's great.
Hey, it was not a simple, like, your dinner is served. It wasn't that.
Right. It was a role. It was
Thank you, Randall. We'll try to find something in the next movie for me.
for the type of director that he seems to be. It's kind of an AD's wet dream in some ways, right? Like he seems very organized and prepared. Would you say he's one of the more time
He's
efficient?
definitely very prepared. We had a very good AD. We had a really terrific AD named Peter Bogart.
Well, we got Blue Lagoon together.
Oh, that's right.
The great thing about Peter is he kept the set really light. He always was joking.
No, that's good. That's healthy, especially in a movie like that. I mean, it's so easy to have so much pressure around you.
Well, we got to
Move and all that.
I've been on sets where the pressure is intense the whole time, and it's really not fun.
No,
And if
forget the actors have to get a performance out. It's an emotional situation.
Making a movie, it's a lot of work. If it's also going to be painful, it's because of the set operations. That really just puts an extra burden on everybody. Why do you need that? That's why having people who lighten it up and aren't martinets and try to push everybody around. And
Well, also having Jonathan on the set every day was terrific because a lot of producers, just are in the office and they stop in every once in a while. But he was right by the camera all the time.
yeah, but I wanted to learn too. And I learned a lot.
He calls influencing learning.
Only in retrospect, I look back, I've worked with a lot of different directors, and with Randall, it was collaborative. If I said something, it would be listened to, even if it didn't work.
The worst director, you don't have to say his name, but what was an incident that happened?
Well, I don't
Worst
say worst, because even the ones who I think were difficult, some of them were very good at what they did. One of them particularly was an excellent craftsman and maybe a really good, and I say men because I've only worked with one woman director because there weren't a lot of women directing. I worked with Susan Stroman on the producers, and she was great, but she was a theater director moving into being a film director.
Very helpful to her.
But in fact, what we did in her case, because I knew she needed to transition, was to sit her down and read through the script with all of the key crew people, and then talk about what they did and, to get her oriented in prep early.
Good.
So, and we also watched musicals together. We watched all the classic musicals we would watch together. And if she saw an idea, I like that. Can we do something like that?
What about The Dirt? You went off and said something.
No, I was talking. Yeah, sorry. I didn't even. No, I worked with someone who was a director who kind of believed that it was his job to come on the set every day and fire somebody, and make it, just for the sake of establishing his position. And that was really horrible, because you never knew who it was going to be. You knew that he was going to take off against one person. It could be the sound mixer. It could be the.
Well, at what point do you as a producer go and say, quit that behavior?
I wasn't a producer.
You're off.
No, this is back in the day when I was a production manager. I didn't have the power, and the producer was one of these absentee producers, really. He was there occasionally, but he didn't really know. And anytime this director wanted something, he would go to the producer, and then the producer would come to me, and he said, well, he wants to do this. And I said, but that's crazy. It's not going to work. And he said, well, I think it might work. He says it's going to work. I said, I'm telling you, it's not going to work. He says, no, I will do it. So I'd wind up doing it. And then it didn't work. And I couldn't say I told you so, because what difference does it make? It didn't work. We had to spend the money, and that happened. So, but it was only really that one time. And it wasn't because I was dealing with someone who was incompetent. I was just dealing with someone who had a different sense of what the process was from where I was.
And
as a producer,
it happened to be an asshole. So that was two things.
That's it. In the case of Navigator, I didn't know who Randall was till I met him, and Randall already had the job. Most of the times I come on and
You'd be
either simultaneously or I'm involved with the choice of the director. So I'm not going to pick somebody who I can't work with. And part of my own ethic as a producer is if I don't have the same view of what the picture is as the director does, I shouldn't do it. If once we know our view is the same, then my job is to protect.
Yeah. You know, I have a little exercise with a kind of partner of mine too, where if we work on a project, whether it's a feature or short or something, producers, directors, we all just kind of, okay, we think this is the right fit. So let's sit down. We write a little paragraph about what the movie is, just so we all agree, we all sign it. And then whenever somebody has lofty ideas, we look at that and say, does it push
the story?
Without writing it, we always knew it.
Yeah.
I mean,
But it's good that you kind of have that sensibility.
no, but when I came into Flight of the Navigator, regardless of how Randall wound up getting the job, once he had it, it was his movie.
Yeah,
And it really
sure.
was.
How deep do you get on the details of everything? You know,
Well, I try to do deep detail. I always am looking at stuff for the future. Like that picture that I showed you was from a book called Special Effects. And at the last page, it said the future is special effects. And it had the possibility of doing this. And that's why I said, this is what we
By
did.
saying the future, it was a challenge.
there wasn't.
To there. I got to do that now.
How did you get started? What was your first project that you actually?
I did a master's thesis at USC called PWEGE, P-W-E-G-E, which is available to be seen on Amazon Prime. And it was a half hour long, and that got me going because I used actors that were known. Luckily, I met a casting director who helped me get it cast, and Universal saw it, and they hired me immediately to start directing TV.
So the casting director, did they come for some workshop at USC, or how'd you get in?
I met him at a party, and I heard he's a casting director. I said, hey, I've got this script.
So, but even for a casting director, how would you get a known actor on a film student's thesis?
Because the script, they loved the script. It was about my grandmother in a nursing home on Christmas Day, how our family tried to give her presents and tried to connect with her. And she was like blind and senile and nothing will happen. And then my character, played by Bruce Davison, stays behind when the family leaves, talks to her, touches her, tries to get through to her. She's not very responsive. And then when he leaves the room, the camera is on a close-up of her and she smiles. This company called Phoenix Films at the Atlanta Film Festival, they decided to distribute it. And they ended up distributing it to nursing homes all over the world. And in those days, the prints cost like $300 each. So 10 years, that student film made $1 million.
Oh my goodness, that's unheard of.
Oh, I know.
You're a film student. You're producing and directing this short. You've never really put a professional piece of media together that they could see. I mean, there's still potential that it's going to be trash, even if the script is good. So is that some convincing that the casting director did on your behalf, or what do you think?
His name is Joel Thurm. He ended up casting a lot of my projects and producing. So he produced The Boy in the Plastic Bubble, and for me, and he casted Grease, and he produced another movie I did called It's My Party. So we that started a relationship for years and years and years, and we're still friends.
That's great. So, and then how does it get to Grease? I mean, this is...
Well, I started doing episodic shows.
Yeah.
Marcus Welby, The Rookies, Lucas Tanner, Starsky and Hutch.
Is it quote unquote easier, I guess, for a director to jump in on an episodic show than it is on a feature film? Or
episodic shows are like baptism in fire because you have maybe we had, I think, 6 days to shoot 60 minutes and 10 pages a day. And it was extremely hard to get that all from the page to the screen. And I knew that I had to do that. I had to cut it on time and on budget on the first show or I would never work again. And because they would be watching. The show had 4 days on the lot and 1 day on location. And the location, of course, would cost more. So I looked at the script. The location day was at Burbank Airport. So I said, let's put a fence up in the back lot and put twinkle lights that go in a V, so it looks like a airport. It just put sound of engine jets and stuff and shoot the scene there. And I did, smart. And my show came in $10,000 under budget.
and then they were like, we want this guy back.
This guy, and sign him up.
That's great.
That's pretty challenging, though, to go from essentially film student to shooting professional television.
Well, I do have a story. Is it okay to have X-rated stuff on? Yes, we're trucking. Well, okay. I showed up the first day, and I was looking around at the crew, and they were all much older, and there's 40 guys, and they're all around me on this big sound stage at Universal. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I have to say out loud, I have to say action and cut in front of all these people. So I action cut. So they started rolling it, and we were shooting Consuela, the nurse. They said, scene 32, speed, and I combined them, and I yelled, cunt! It's meant. And I right to this woman who was, she said, I've never been so insulted. It's turned purple, and the crew laughed, and so, yeah.
I don't know if you do it, Randall, but I know some directors at some point, they concentrate and they'll have the AD say action or something like that. They'll just tap them and say, you do it, because I just want to, but I'm sure it comes from that.
Got over it.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you did. And I don't think you have any problem with action and cut. And well, he probably does, but no, but even though we're not working on film anymore,
I don't.
you still rolling. You still, yeah, you would think you keep rolling anyway, but we still do. We still say that.
It helps in post to have the organization of separated clips and stuff.
I guess
so you
that's
don't have to go through these long takes. And
We're right. The editor is probably lost when you say, okay, just go again. And then they start over, and there's no visual reference to
they don't like it very much because they do have to sit through the entire thing, and then they have to separate the clips themselves and turn them into extra clips that they can.
Didn't think of that. That's smart, yeah.
I worked on a movie that I actually directed years later with Vanessa Redgrave and Raul Julia. And Vanessa is a method actress. She does not like to start a scene where it starts in the script. She likes to work her way into it. And I had Raul Julia, who needs to know where the cues come in. He's waiting for a specific cue. So it was a situation where I literally had tapped the cameraman on the shoulder and I said, okay, start rolling. And we were still filming on film. It wasn't like video where you could just let it roll forever. She usually was good about it, but she would start the scene and improv her way into it in order not to have the film run out. I would see her start, and I wouldn't even tap the guy to start the camera until I said, okay, no. You start the camera, and then at a certain point, she'd come into the cue spot that would cue the next actor, and the actors would come into it. They all called her tail slate.
Oh, tail slates are the audience.
You always have the tail stick.
You have to mark the shot.
Yeah, so you would at the end.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah, tail slate. That's right. But
I like old timers because they just deliver the goods and with no problem. I worked with Ralph Bellamy, who was fantastic, and John Gielgud and Vanessa Lynn Redgrave. All the people who are like older were always like right on cue. Some of the younger kids who maybe haven't had much training, you have to spend a lot of time trying to coerce them into a performance.
are you a 3 takes and onward kind of guy, or 15 when you really just get it? So you do a lot of rehearsals on set?
Rehearse it and then shoot it.
Yeah. Do you rehearse? I mean, I'm sure you do read-throughs and stuff, but on the day, do you kind of keep the cameras off, rehearse once or twice?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
There's a real emotional scene, then that's a different story. But most of the stuff, it's
So if it is an emotional scene, what's your process?
well, some of the things that Jonathan was just talking about. You let the actor get into it, and you tap the operator to go and tail slate it so they can get into that.
To get into that emotion, yeah. There's an ongoing debate when you shoot coverage, and I'm not suggesting that you shoot coverage, which means you get your wide and your medium closes and your close-ups and just move on with the scene. I'm sure you do that more in television.
Yeah.
But is it better to start on the tight shots, get the performance, and then back out, or is it better to get everybody warmed up by shooting the wide and then again
to know the actors really well and know when they're good? I mean, Frank Sinatra, for instance, I was an extra on Von Ryan's Express. He would only do one take, and he wouldn't do any others. And then I've worked with actors who got really better on each take.
And do you gauge that in rehearsals before, or do you make that a consideration in casting even?
I do. Well, not a consideration casting, but you just have to juggle, like you were talking about with Raul and Vanessa. You have to figure out a way to make it work for those two people. You had to work different.
Well, so now, I'm thinking, okay, so if you got one that works like this and one that's more like Sinatra, you got to figure out.
Plus, like what you just said about Sinatra, Capra in his book wrote about working on Hole in the Head with Edward G. Robinson and Frank Sinatra. And he said Robinson didn't get good until his 8th and 9th day.
Exactly.
And Frank Sinatra was the one who was gone. he would like rehearse Robinson with somebody else to get him up to the point. And then Frank would just come in. Anytime you're working with people who come out of different traditions and they don't work the same way, it's like making scrambled eggs.
There's all kinds of considerations like this. And we had a scene, even for the DP, it can get a bit tricky. We had a scene where there was I don't think you could get more Caucasian than this girl. She was milky white skin, and she was next to a Haitian guy in the same scene. And we didn't think anything of it because we never had to light so differently. But then when you're looking at it in the camera, and the camera this is 10 years, 15 years ago, before digital was, So this is not film. This is digital, where the dynamic range was very low, limited, and you either couldn't see his face or you couldn't see her face. It was blowing out or underexposed.
Lilies of the Field had white nuns and Sidney Poitier. They had the same problem.
Yeah. Problem solving in film is like they're synonymous with each other.
When we did Grease at the drive-in scene, I wanted to have something on the screen that would be behind Travolta when he sang his song. And we had like 10 trailers, popcorn trailers. I got 50s popcorn trailers from a place in Chicago. Normally you would have that all set before, but the night we ended up at the night there, and we didn't know what we were going to do. So we ran them all. All the crew sat around, and we ran 10 or 20 popcorn trailers. And I finally saw the hot dog jump in the bun. I said, "Can you sync that to the end of the playback?" And they said, "Well, we think we can." And they did it. And that was just so exciting because it was like an improv. I did a music video in volumetric capture that hasn't been released yet.
Explain what that is.
Well, Intel used to have a giant soundstage down at Manhattan Beach Studios with 90 cameras around it, a big green dome and white floor, and it could photograph with petabytes of data, whoever you put in there. We had 20 dancer, and then when that recording is finished, you could have that material. You can either make a film out of it, you can go and go back in and pick out pieces and do over shoulder.
So it captures everything all the time.
Or you can do one smooth move through the whole thing, or you can make it into holograms that are on a table, or you can put a headset on and walk in among the dancers. So it's really amazing. And it was so expensive that they dismantled the whole thing right after we shot.
A point of that being made was just to experiment with new technology.
Yeah, Intel had lots of money, and
You've been to the Dome in Las Vegas, Sphere. I mean, yeah,
it'd be the next step.
No, but I've heard that they're, in some ways trying to adapt, trying to find a way to do a film that actually a real film that actually works within the Dome. And I mean, it's got to be very complicated.
Well, when we did our virtual reality series called Defrost, we took it to the Griffith Park Observatory and ran it there, and it worked great.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So you can take something that's shot for 3D, it's 360, and project it into a dome.
How do you project it? I mean, what is it? Multiple?
You have to break it down into whatever the projectors are there. It's a really complicated physical.
It's kind of custom for every theater. And
custom, yeah. You have to figure out how to adapt it with algorithms and all that to make it all smooth and go.
Well, maybe AI will help that. Make it
simpler, faster. Unbelievable, the stuff you can do right now. And I've seen people are starting to make films with AI. And it's just the beginning, but wow.
Have you and your brother played with stuff there?
Yes. We're getting ready to do a movie now, and we're using AI for the lookbook to show what the movie will look like.
You were the first person. I think, what's the name of the project? The Silver
Medal Lover.
The Silver Medal Lover, which was before anybody was, and that again was a character that was going to be, was a real character and a digital character that was created. And I don't think people understood what you were after, but it's no longer imaginary. This can be done,
The script is still lying around.
Right now. Yeah.
I talked to you about this too. If you're a filmmaker now, you kind of look at the sort of Adam Sandler model or the Mel Brooks model, or, the Blumhouse, if you want to take in that direction, where you kind of get good at something, you carve out an audience, a niche, and then you keep feeding that. But then there's guys like you who there seemingly isn't really, you're not catering to a certain audience. You know what a good film is. Does that make your job harder?
Oh, it makes it more interesting, and challenging, and you can't always get things off the ground right away, but I wouldn't want to keep doing the same thing over and over
That's the
again.
great thing about it, I think. Without giving too much away, Randall's next film is very different than anything else he's ever made. And it's a great story. Every time you make a movie, it's like creating a new business from the ground up. The only thing that makes it really fun for us, for the filmmakers who really love the process of what we do, is that every time there's also a whole new set of challenges. We get to go to a new location or a new place, or even if we do it in a stage, we get to do things that we didn't try the last time. The art side of it is always is a new challenge.
And also the researching the new area that you're going to be working in is fun too. I mean, you really get into things that you never ever be around.
Do you ever produce your own stuff too?
I produced a few films. I did It's My Party, which was an AIDS movie. That was a personal film I did. And Blue Lagoon I produced.
Was that because nobody was going to produce it, or was it because?
Yeah, I could. It was very hard to get Blue Lagoon off the ground, and everyone turned it down. They said no one will watch a movie with only 2 people in it. So I went to Frank Price, who had given me my first job. He was at Columbia then, but he was at Universal when he was
He's our major studio executive. For those of you who don't know, our Price.
He had changed his studio, so I went back to him, and he gave me a shot. So that was great.
So how do you convince a guy like Frank to give you the shot?
He just believed in me because he started me off. So yeah.
But aren't those guys primarily worried about ROI?
Yeah, but those days they allowed the executives some amount of choice. Nowadays they have to get it approved by the marketing department, the publicity department.
See, now it just seems like as long as you're vanilla, don't shake the boat, don't do anything crazy or different because you don't want to lose your job.
Well, the old days they had filmmakers as running studios, and they had taste, and they made decisions. Now, no head of a studio makes any decisions now by themselves. No. They all report to boards of directors.
And it's all based on returns and actor value and all that stuff. But I could see how Elephant Man and Cabrini both on paper would have made an executive kind of shit their pants. It doesn't seem like it would work. You turn down the biggest actor of all time for Elephant Man, and then when Cabrini comes along,
Dustin Hoffman.
he was going to be the Elephant Man. He said, no.
His lawyer, and I had no power. I was I had no power. I couldn't do that. I had to convince Mel, who was helping us put the finance together, that to have Dustin Hoffman play the Elephant Man, everyone would be looking to see where Dustin Hoffman was. I said we needed to use somebody who wasn't known like that. For me, it could have gotten me out the door. What? Are you kidding me? You don't want Dustin? And it's but we suffer that issue. I mean, Randall does. I do too. On every movie where you get most of what you want, and you want to get everything you want, but they all want the biggest name, and the biggest name may not always be the right name.
But it doesn't necessarily even mean that that's going to guarantee any kind of a better return, because, Travolta was in a huge movie that didn't do well at all, Battlefield Earth, right? A few of them, yeah. And he was a big name when that started, and that kind of took him down with it in a sense, right? And then conversely, there's movies like The Elephant Man. Okay, it had Anthony Hopkins in it, but then it ends up being at the Oscars, nominated for every one. And Cabrini, Christiana will be known, but she wasn't at the time. And Morse and Lithgow are big actors, but
they don't open movies.
They don't open movies. So
I wanted to ask Randall, when you work with John Travolta, obviously you would work with him in Boy in the Plastic Bubble. So you knew him before you did Grease.
Yeah.
Did that enter into anything?
Well, he's the one who got me on Grease, because they asked, who do you want to work with? And he said me. So
is Travolta producer on Grease?
No,
but he was powerful.
Yeah, the biggest star. And he had a list of people he would work with, or no, he wanted to work with. Not that he would work, that he got along with, and I was one of them. So
were you early in the process, or were you also kind of a replacement?
No, I was actually supposed to originally do Saturday Night Fever. I met with them the week that came out, the story on the New York Magazine, arrival rights to the Saturday night. I was flown to New York to meet with Stigwood and Nick Cohn, the writer. And then I heard nothing for a couple of weeks, and then suddenly they offered me Grease. So
I'll take it.
I'm glad it was that one. Cause
did they ask you, like, what the hell do you know about music? Or, I mean, how that's a pretty big part of the movie.
I know. Well, we luckily had Pat Birch, who was the original choreographer of the Broadway show, and she had done it for, it had been running on Broadway for years and years.
So you had the help around you.
And then I had the cameraman from Jaws. So,
Good tea.
Butler. Yeah, so I was well covered, and they worked as a team.
Yeah. Great. All right. I think that's about it. Anything else you want to add?
Go to randallkleiser.com and look around.
Hopefully we'll do more of these. This is great. Look, I want to work with you, and I think we got a real good shot here.
Okay.
Great. Hey, thanks a lot.
All right.
Appreciate you coming in.